From an evolutionary point of view, the DNA which is characteristic of any species is naturally selected so that it becomes a set of instructions for surviving and reproducing in the normal environment of that species. But bird DNA includes instructions for how to build wings and how to build a nervous system that knows how to fly with them. Dolphin DNA includes instructions for how to swim. Aardvark DNA includes instructions for how to dig. Octopus DNA includes instructions for how to change color, and so on. The genetic database of a species will become a storehouse of information about the environments of the past, environments in which ancestors survived and passed on the genes that helped them to do so. To the extent that present and future environments resemble those of the past, mostly they do, this genetic book of the dead will turn out to be a useful manual for survival in the present and future. The repository of that information will at any one moment reside in individual bodies, but in the longer term, where reproduction is sexual and DNA shuffled from body to body, the database of survival instructions will be the gene pool of the species. Each individual's genome in any one generation will be a sample from the species database. Different species will have different databases because of their different ancestral worlds. Like sand bluffs cast into fantastic shapes by the desert winds, the database in the gene pool of camels will encode information about deserts and how to survive in them. The DNA in mole gene pools will contain instructions and hints for survival in dark, moist soil. The DNA in predator gene pools will increasingly contain information about prey animals, their evasive tricks and how to outsmart them. The DNA in prey gene pools will come to contain information about predators and how to dodge and outrun them. The DNA in all gene pools contains information about parasites and how to resist their delicious invasions. Information on how to handle the present so as to survive into the future is necessarily gleaned from the past. Non-random survival of DNA in ancestral bodies is the obvious way in which information from the past is recorded for future use, and this is the route by which the primary database of DNA is built up. But there are three further ways in which information about the past is sequestered and used to improve future survival. These are the immune system, the nervous system, and culture. Along with wings, lungs, and all the other apparatus for survival, each of the three secondary information gathering systems was ultimately prefigured by the primary one, natural selection of DNA. We could call them together the four memories. The first memory is the DNA repository of ancestral survival techniques, written on the moving scroll that is the gene pool of the species. I've said enough about this and we'll say no more. The second memory. Just as the inherited database of DNA records the recurrent details of ancestral environments and how to survive them, the immune system, the second memory, does the same thing for diseases and other insults to the body during the individual's own lifetime. This database of past diseases and how to survive them is unique to each individual and is written in the repertoire of proteins we call antibodies. One population of antibodies for each pathogen, precisely tailored by past experience with the proteins that characterize the pathogen. Like many children of my generation, I had measles and chickenpox. My body remembers the experience, the memories being embodied in antibody proteins, along with the rest of my personal database of previously vanquished invaders. I fortunately never had polio, but medical science has cleverly devised techniques, vaccination, for planting false memories of diseases never suffered. I shall never contract polio because my body thinks it has done so in the past, and my immune system database is equipped with the appropriate antibodies, fooled into making them by the injection of a harmless version of the virus. Fascinatingly, as the work of various Nobel Prize-winning medical scientists has shown, the immune system's database is itself built up by a quasi-Darwinian process of random variation and non-random selection. But in this case, the non-random selection is not selection of bodies for their capacity to survive, but of proteins within the body for their capacity to envelop or otherwise neutralize invading proteins. The third memory is the one we ordinarily think of when we use the word, the memory that resides in the nervous system. By a mechanism that we don't yet fully understand, our brains retain a store of past experiences to parallel the antibody memory of past diseases and the DNA memory, or so we regard it, of ancestral deaths and successes. At its simplest, the third memory works by a trial and error process that can be seen as yet another analogy to natural selection. When searching for food, an animal may try various actions. Though not strictly random, this trial stage is a reasonable analogy to genetic mutation. The analogy to natural selection is reinforcement, the system of rewards, positive reinforcement, and punishments, negative reinforcement. An action, such as turning over leaves, trial, turns out to yield beetle larvae and wood lice, hiding under the leaves, reward. The nervous system has a rule that says any trial action that is followed by reward should be repeated. Any trial action that is followed by nothing, or worse, followed by punishment, for example pain, should not be repeated. The third memory, the one in the brain, has spawned a fourth. The database in my brain contains more than just a record of the happenings and sensations of my personal life, although that was the limit when brains originally evolved. Your brain includes collective memories inherited non-genetically from past generations, handed down by word of mouth or in writing or nowadays on the internet. The world in which you and I live is richer by far because of who went before us and inscribed their impacts on the database of human culture. Newton and Marconi, Shakespeare and Steinbeck, Bach and the Beatles, Stevenson and the Wright brothers, Jenner and Salk, Curie and Einstein, von Neumann and Berners-Lee. And of course, Darwin. All four memories are part of or manifestations of the vast superstructure of apparatus for survival, which was originally and primarily built up by the Darwinian process of non-random DNA survival. Darwin was right to hedge his bets. Obviously, you're seeing the red bit is the bit that I'm concentrating on. Darwin was right to hedge his bets, but today we're pretty certain that all living creatures on this planet are descended from a single ancestor. The evidence, as Jerry, I think it was, said today, is that the genetic code is universal, all but identical across animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, archaea, and viruses. The 64-word dictionary, by which 3-letter DNA words are translated into 20 amino acids and 1 punctuation mark, is the same 64-word dictionary wherever you look in the living kingdoms, with 1 or 2 exceptions too minor to undermine generalization. If, say, some weird, anomalous microbes called the harem scariotes were discovered, which didn't use DNA at all, or didn't use proteins, or used proteins but strung them together from a different set of amino acids, from the 20, or which used DNA but not in a triplet code, or a triplet code but not the same 64-word dictionary, if any of these conditions were met, we might suggest that life had originated twice. Once for the harem scariotes, and once for the rest of life. For all Darwin knew, indeed for all anyone knew before the discovery of DNA, some existing creatures might have had the properties I have here attributed to the harem scariotes, in which case, into a few forms, in Darwin's words, would have been justified. Is it possible that two independent origins of life could both have hit upon the same 64-word code? Very unlikely. For that to be plausible, the existing code would have to have strong advantages over alternative codes, and there would have had to be a gradual ramp of improvement towards it, a ramp for natural selection to climb up. Both these conditions have been present. Francis Crick early suggested that the genetic code is a frozen accident, which once in place was difficult or impossible to change.